there are jobs available so they can lead decent lives and hope for better prospects in their future. This is the great challenge of development, I'm sure, in any country, in the Dominican Republic and for us. But for us, the scale of the challenge is vast. It is a huge country with a huge population and a huge level of poverty to be overcome. In each of the last 10 years, India has pulled about 10 million people out of poverty through our progressive economic policies. But that is only 1%. So when you say that each year your success is only pulling 1% of your people out of poverty, you see what the challenge is for us. We can speak of 8% growth and 9% growth and all of that, but we cannot forget the other percent figure, which is the 25% of our population who are in desperate need. And that, to me, is a very important reason why this foundation's focus on development should always be underscored, because ultimately human beings are the ones whom we have to think about and not merely numbers. Development is not only a matter for economists and planners, a matter of GNP figures, it's a matter of people. And that is what brings me to the other element of your foundation's name, which of course is democracy. Because India is rather unusual in the world, in the developing world, for having made the choice from the very beginning to pursue its development challenges through the method of democracy. We became independent in 1947. In the next 10-15 years, many developing countries acquired their independence. In Africa and Asia, of course, many of you in Latin America were already free much earlier, but in Africa and Asia, countries are still colonized. Many of these countries chose authoritarian methods, dictatorships, autocratic rule, on the grounds that they said the challenges of development could not be faced while a country was divided, while there were various tendencies, political passions, ideologies, and so on, that the only thing to do, according to these other countries, was to rule directly and firmly in order to succeed in development. Many Latin American countries had the same experience. India refused to accept that argument. India insisted that democracy would be the method through which we would pursue our development. Now, we had a good reason to do that. Ours is a large and diverse country. We have in our country people of a wide variety of ethnicities. Rather like the audience today in the Dominican Republic, we have almost every shade of skin color available in our country. But unlike the Dominican Republic, we also have a multiplicity of languages. We have 35 languages in our country that are spoken by more than 1 million people each. And if you go to India and you cash your money, you'll find on your rupee note that the denomination is written out in 14 different scripts. So language becomes a complicated dividing factor. Then if you look at religion, India is home to every religion known to mankind, with the possible exception of Shintoism. Though even Shintoism has some Hindu elements, I'm told. And what is more, these are religions that have existed in India since time immemorial. I can perhaps surprise some of you by telling you that there are people in my home state of Kerala whose ancestors have been Christian longer than any of your ancestors, whether they came from Europe or the Americas or Africa or anywhere else. Why? Because we have the oldest Christian community outside Palestine. St. Thomas, doubting Thomas the Apostle, took a boat across the Arabian Sea and came and converted people around 52 AD in Kerala. And their descendants, of course, are still there. We have a strong Christian population. A quarter of our population in Kerala is Christian. But we have an even older community of Jewish people, because the Jews fled after the destruction of their temple, either the first destruction by the Babylonians or the second one by the Romans. Legend is not clear. But one oral legend that is very famous in Kerala is that when St. Thomas arrived, he was welcomed on shore by a flute-playing Jewish girl. And it still remains in India today, and not in India, in the world today, the only example of a Jewish diaspora that never knew a single incident of anti-Semitism. This was a community that was welcomed, as all other communities were welcomed in our country, and no one ever persecuted them, until, I'm afraid, the Portuguese showed up in the 16th century, the Inquisition still in their minds, but that's another story, not Indians. At no point did the Jews in India suffer persecution. Islam came to India. Yes, in the north it came through the sword from the Arabian lands. In the south, however, it came through peaceful travelers, missionaries, traders, who brought Muhammad's message of equality and brotherhood to our people. We also have a number of indigenous faiths that grew up. Sikhism was a product of the interconnections and the interplay between Hinduism and Islam. Jainism and Buddhism, however, are much older than Islam or Christianity. They go back to the 6th and 7th centuries BC in India. And they still have adherents today. Religions of non-violence, of ahimsa, of respect for all living creatures. Now these religious traditions are very strong. Even as an imported religious tradition of the Parsis, the Zoroastrians, the fire worshippers, who fled Persia in the 7th century when they were persecuted by the Muslim rulers there. And they came to India and they found a warm welcome. There's a very interesting story of this Parsi emigre ship arriving off the coast of Gujarat. And of course, they did not have a language in common with the Indian people there. They wanted to come on shore and settle in India. So the king sent them a messenger to say there is no room. We are full. We have too many people already. So to illustrate the point, since they could not understand each other's language, the emissary of the king took a glass of water and dropped a stone in it and showed how when you drop the stone, the water flows out of the glass to show we have no room. So the Zoroastrian leader asked the emissary to wait, and he summoned a glass of milk. And into the milk, he took a spoon of sugar and stirred it into the milk, and nothing spilled. So he said, we will be like the sugar in your milk. We will stay, we will not cause any problem. The emissary was so touched, he told the king, we have to take these people. And they have been in India since the 7th century. So there are so many such stories, but we have such a diverse population. All these religions, all these languages, all these regions as well, because our country is a federal country. We have 28 states, but many of these states are huge. The state of Uttar Pradesh, for example, has 185 million people, which means that if it were an independent country, it would be the 4th most populous country in the world, but it's only one of India's 28 states. So the problem is that regionalism also comes in, and it becomes particularly significant when there is ethnicity associated with it, because in India, you can tell a Bengali from a Punjabi very easily, because they do have different appearances, different languages, different cultures, different habits of food, of speaking, of entertainment, and so there is clear difference in this country. And equally, a Punjabi in India has ethnically more in common with a Pakistani, and a Bengali has more in common with a Bangladeshi than they would with their fellow Indians from, say, Pune or Bangalore. So what makes India a nation? That is the interesting question. With all these differences, but I'll tell you, what makes India a nation is the central idea of an ancient civilization united perhaps by a shared historical experience, but more importantly sustained by common democratic practice. It is democracy that allows a country to accept all the diversity, that says you can have any identity you want. You can have multiple identities, because all those identities are safe under the common identity that is Indianness. So that you can be a good Bengali, a good Muslim, and a good Indian all at once. That is sustained in a democratic system where everyone, irrespective of what language they speak, what the color of the skin is, what food they eat, what states they come from, what God they worship or not, as the case may be, all feel they have the same stake in the society, the same opportunity